I work the night shift at the Southfield Inn. Other than handling late check-ins, I'm supposed to keep an eye on the security footage. I've seen my fair share of strange occurrences. Drunk kids trying to break into the pool area at 2 a.m. A sweet little old lady having sex with her husband in the elevator. But nothing like last night. At around 3:30 a.m., while microwaving dinner, I checked the security cams. To my surprise, there were two people, a man and a woman, getting on the elevator. The man was wearing a tattered leather jacket and black gloves. The woman had blonde hair and pink lipstick. She looked like she had been crying for hours, mascara and red ringing her eyes. He pressed the button for floor 4. I switched the camera to 4. The elevator doors slid open, and they stepped out into the hall. Blondie still looked miserable, and Leather Jacket had his arm looped around her hips, as if he owned her. He gestured to one of the doors to his left, and that's when I realized every single door was open. Now, we have self-closing doors, so someone must have propped the doors open, or been holding them that way. The lights were off in each room, and the dark doorway stretched down the hallway, seeming to never end. Blondie in Leather Jacket walked down the hallway. He was saying something to her, and she was slowly nodding, but I couldn't tell what. Now, I knew some of those rooms were occupied, so why weren't they doing anything? Why weren't they fluttering around in confusion, asking who the hell opened their door at 3:30 a.m.? But I didn't have much time to wonder, because the lights flickered and then went out. The screen was black. My heart was pounding now, so loudly that I could hear it in the silence of the room. I shook the mouse with sweaty fingers, as if that could somehow prod the lights back on. Finally, they flickered back on. All the doors were closed now, but now, Leather Jacket was carrying something. A small bag. It must have been filled with something heavy, because he leaned to one side as he continued down the hallway. They got back in the elevator. Blondie was sobbing now, her head in her hands. He turned to her and began talking. I turned on the microphone and listened. Done now. All we gotta do is take care of the girl at the front desk and destroy the security footage. The blood drained from my head, and then I bolted up. I ran out of the hotel into the darkness. In front of me stood Route 52, still as a country path. The neon lights of the town below shimmered like twinkling little stars. I ran towards the town. At the 24-hour diner, I called the police. When they got there, Blondie and Leather Jacket were gone, as was the security footage. And every single person who occupied floor 4 was missing. The Loud family on their way to Disney World, the Don Juan and his 2 lady friends, the old lady with the dog, and the Metallica guy with the loud headphones, all vanished. They did find one thing though, a Southfield napkin written in pink lipstick were the words, "Help me," and below it, an address. "We'll take you to the address as soon as backup arrives." "But she's in danger. Miss, our priority is finding the guest that disappeared," the officer said, disappearing back into room 402. Oh, they don't believe me. I looked at the napkin, crumpled and sweaty in my hand. For all they know, I may have wrote this note, and there never was a blonde lady. I sighed, turned on my heel, and walked briskly down the hallway. The chatter and blips of radios faded to a low hum. I glanced at the doors, shut tight. As far as I could tell, there were no broken locks, no blood smears, no evidence of the disappearances at all. Leatherjacket's face flashed through my mind, his intense stare, his smirk as he held Blondie against him with no regard for her terror. I stopped. The door to room 429 was ajar. I looked down. A rolled-up magazine had been stuffed between the door and the frame, keeping it open. Beyond, the room was pitch black. Go back downstairs. The words pounded in my head, as steady as my heartbeat, but I felt the irresistible pull of curiosity, the call of the unknown. I slowly took a step forward. Silence filled my ears, punctuated by my own muffled footsteps against the carpet, and the ticking of the clock down the hall. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open. Light spilled into the dark room. It appeared empty. I reached for the switch and flicked it on. My heart sank. Toys scattered the floor. A little blue police car, a stuffed elephant, a toy fireman's hat. A family had stayed here with a child, and now they were gone. I stepped into the room. In the bathroom, crumpled towels lay on the floor. Toothbrushes were set out across the counter, some still bearing dried bits of paste. The beds were rumpled in tangled messes. Dangling onto the floor, I stepped forward. Crunch. Ow. I grabbed my foot. It throbbed angrily. Something small lay in the middle of the burgundy carpet. I bent over and picked it up. It was a miniature plastic teddy bear, no larger than a dime, and much heavier than I'd expected for such a small thing. What a strange toy. And then I heard the voice, calling loudly from down the hall. Anna, we're ready to go. I slipped it into my pocket and headed into the hall. The directions led us down a narrow gravel road. Officer Jingwen sighed heavily as clouds of blue-gray dust kicked up behind us. Had to be a gravel road, she muttered. Can't stand that damn crunching sound. It's like someone eating rocks. But I wasn't listening to her banter. Blondie might be dead by now or disappeared, like the rest. I looked out the window, watching the orange rays of dawn peek through the trees. The house rolled into sight. It was a little more than a shack, standing among overgrown grass and fallen branches. The windows were black, and at first I thought it was just dark inside. But then I realized some sort of black paper had been plastered to the glass. Stay in the car. What? This could be a dangerous situation, she said, her hand reaching for her holster. Wouldn't want to be responsible for killing a child first week on the job. I balked at her. I'm not a child. I'm 18. She shrugged. You aren't an adult until you can knock back 10 shots legally, she smirked, without blacking out. I just stared at her. Okay, look, I'll secure the house, and as soon as I give the signal, you come in, alright? She disappeared down the cracked stone path and into the house. I waited. 5 minutes went by. Then she poked out of the door and gave me a thumbs up. I shot out of the car, sprinted across the grass. I yanked the door open. It groaned back with a loud creak. The house was messy. No, that was an understatement. The house was a wreck. Empty beer bottles, soggy pizza boxes, and crumpled up tissues littered the floor. And then there were the figurines. Hundreds of them, covering every surface, like the miniature warriors that guys paint for strategy games. Except instead of ogres and superhumans, they looked like ordinary people. I reached out to grab one. "Don't touch anything," Jingwen barked. Staring up the stairs, the figurine in front of me was a man, no more than 2 inches tall, dark eyes no bigger than birdseed. To his left stood a brunette woman, to his right a blonde. Both were wearing black lingerie that made them almost more indecent than being naked. I shrugged and walked further into the house. In the kitchen, the swarms of figurines grew sparser. A few stood in a shallow puddle near the sink. Several were scattered across the floor. A whole family stood on the kitchen table, the father chasing after a toddler son, the mother looking at a rice-sized smartphone. A dachshund stood in the center, no bigger than a button, and then I heard a shriek from upstairs. I raced up. Jingwen was standing in the gray shadows of the bedroom, staring at something past my field of vision. I ran in, panting like a wild dog, and followed her gaze. From within the shadows of the closet, Blondie was staring at us. Her eyes were wild, her hair tangled and frizzed, and she was still crying. "Is this your girl?" Jingwen said, stepping towards the closet. I looked at her. One hand was bound with thick string to the closet door. The other was clenched tightly around one of the figurines. When her eyes met mine, she broke into a fresh sob. "I'm sorry," she choked out. No, everything's okay," I said. "Do you have a knife, officer? We need to get her out of here." "I'm so sorry," she continued wailing. Why are you so sorry?" "He said he'd bring her back," she choked. "As long as I brought you here. I'm so sorry I didn't." Officer Jingwen and I looked at each other. "What are you talking about?" she said, half defiant, half afraid. Blondie shook her head, the tears slipping onto the floor. And that's when we heard it. The sound of a door creaking open across the hall. He stepped into the light. Outside of a computer monitor, he looked worse. Tired eyes ringed with dark circles, greasy hair falling across his forehead, and he wore a smirk that sent chills down my spine. Jingwen drew her gun. "Hands in the air," she said with forced calm. He didn't reply, and took a step forward. "Hands in the air, I'll shoot." "Go ahead." Her hands shook, and then she pulled the trigger. Bang. For a second, time stood still. The light above our head flickered, and everyone was frozen in the gray shadows of dawn. Blondie's face contorted in a sob. Jingwen's mouth stretched in a gasp. His casual grin, as if laughing at a joke. Ping. The bullet bounced off his jacket and onto the floor. Now no larger than a grain of sand. Jingwen's eyes widened. "How? That's not possible." "You're all skeptics at first," he said, picking up a figurine off the nightstand. "But sooner or later, you come to believe." "Believe what? That he's turning people into those?" I glanced at the figurine in his hand, to the one clenched in Blondie's fist. Both were clearly plastic, just toys. But if it isn't true, how do I explain the bullet? Or the fact that everyone on floor 4 disappeared? I shook my head. It doesn't matter what he thinks he's doing. Just distract him as much as you can. I took a few steps back towards the window. Okay, say I believe everything. But why then? Why are you doing this? Haven't you heard? He said, his smile turning into a determined frown. The time is nigh. With his index finger, he pointed to the sky. What does that mean? I asked. My fingers fell into the groove beneath the panes. I pressed upwards and felt the window shift slightly. There's a better way. Now he broke into a grin and looked down at the figurines that scattered the floor. With newfound affection. The day of reckoning is almost here, and I have done far more than my duty. They're going to be so pleased. Okay, he's insane. I have no idea what to say to that. No idea. Hey, she kept her end of the deal, I said, motioning to Blondie with one hand, while the other stayed on the window. Just a little more force and I could get it open. He scoffed. What do you care? Shouldn't you keep your end? Heh, sure. Sounds fair to me. He walked over to her, eyes glinting with amusement. Blondie unfurried her fingers, revealing the figurine in her palm, her eyes glinting with hope. He yanked it from her and held it up to his eyes. She's a pretty one. Then he threw it to the ground, lifted his foot, and brought it down. Snap. Blondie screamed, a horrible, wounded scream that faded into convulsing sobs. You should have known better than to bargain with one of us. He yelled at her. We never compromise. The better way is the right way. There is no middle ground. He paused, and then, with a wild scream, she flew at him, her arms locked around his neck, and they fell to the ground in a tangled heap. Click. I yanked the window open. Come on, I yelled, diving through the window. Follow me, Jangwon, please. I hit the damp soil with a thud. Pain shot through the left side of my body, but I picked myself up off the ground. I turned around, heart racing. No, she wasn't following. The little yellow light in the window flickered. No, no, no. Thump. Jangwon flew out of the window. Run, she screamed. We jumped in the car, breathless and pained. She jammed the keys into the ignition just as a dark shape, a flash of black leather, fell from the window. The car screeched away. We flew down the road, the gravel crunching underneath the wheels. Nobody believed our story, of course. At least, not our versions of the story. They believed that some weirdo with figurines was trying to lure people into his house, just not the rest. Jangwon was promptly fired from the police force, both for inventing tall tales and for bringing a civilian along with her to a dangerous situation. They sent more cops over to the house. By the time they got there, it was completely cleared out. Even the figurines were gone. I quit my job at the hotel and moved halfway across the country, where I became a barista. Not quite as good of a job, but at least it came with discounted coffee instead of nighttime weirdos. It was around closing time after a week on the job that the couple came in. A woman wearing glasses and a bun, followed by a blonde guy. I served them up 2 coffees and set out to wipe down some tables. In the empty coffee shop, I couldn't help but overhear their conversation as it echoed off the tile. Like I said in the email, I have a problem, he said. You see, I live with my parents, but they nag me all the time. Stop playing video games. It's too late to go out with your friends. All of that. But I don't have the money to move out. I have nowhere to go. She nodded and looked at him with a small smile. There's a better way, she said. I dropped the rag. We will take care of your parents, she said. And then we will take care of you. Wait, take care of them? What do you mean? He started to look nervous. His eyes darted around the shop. All I want is a little money to move out. I thought you came here to give me that. The woman shook her head, then pointed up. The time is nigh, she said, and you have come to me not a moment too soon. We both stared at her. The day of reckoning is almost upon us.